Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's episode and today's guest and fellow entrepreneur because in the middle of a big life move, I wish that I knew about today's guest's business so much sooner because this is someone who has built something really incredible. I'm convinced that he's going to fill in a massive gap that was left when Mint went out of business or got acquired. I don't know what happened to Mint. I was a very loyal user, but I actually think today's guest business takes all of that to the next level, especially when you're managing a household. So I think he's so brilliant in so many ways. Let me introduce you to him. His name is Jabari Pulliam. Jabari is a software developer and the founder of Dena, which is a household management application designed to streamline domestic life. How few solutions do we have there? With over 20 years of experience building scalable systems for major Silicon Valley platforms, Jabari brings a deep, all-around technical expertise to the world of entrepreneurship. His focus is on creating practical, high-impact tools that solve the complexities of running a modern home, from budgeting to organization and so much more. He's a dedicated technologist and home improvement enthusiast based in the Bay Area, and Jabari is committed to building software that works as hard as the people using it. So we're all in for an absolute treat today, being joined by an incredibly innovative entrepreneur. So let's dive straight into my interview with Jabari Pulliam. All right, Jabari, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Heck yes, I am so excited to geek out about all the brilliant things that you've built into Dena. But before we get there, we've got to start with you personally. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Jabari? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Well, Brian, as an engineer, I've always had side projects. I think it's really incredibly important to always be building and always be exploring technologies outside of your day-to-day work. And so I've always had something that I'm working on in the background. And so I feel that Dena was just kind of something that I was exploring, or concepts that I was exploring that really started to take off once I reached a life event that kind of made them important. And that was me meeting the love of my life and getting married.
Yes, I love that overview, and I love that it was born out of something so beautiful and something so important in your life, Jabari. And you heard in my teaser to this episode that I recently went through a move, and holy cow, it makes me realize how many moving pieces there are when you go through the mortgage process, when you've got money moving, when you're keeping track of all the expenses that come up with it. There's so much to keep track of. So introduce listeners to Dena, if they haven't heard of it before. And you also heard, sorry, I'm going to really layer this on. You also heard that I kind of teased about Mint, is that I feel like Mint was such a good personal finance solution back then. It seems to me like Dena is Mint, but in a more home management, in house management structure. So introduce it all to our listeners.
Exactly. Well, back in 2021, as I said, I've met the love of my life. And in 2022, we got engaged and purchased a home together. And at the time, I was very heavily invested in tools to manage my life. So I used Mint for personal finance. I also had my favorite note-taking tools, using Google Calendar for all my scheduling needs. And so I had this entire stack. But then once I got married, it was a matter of trying to merge my system with my wife's. And I found that was incredibly difficult because we had our own preferred ways of working. And I found that so much of being married or managing a household, there are these tasks that are really kind of logistical concerns that are, it's not just being in love. It's, paying bills, making sure you stay on the same page about work that needs to be done, tasks, managing schedules. And so it started off with Mint going away, I believe Mint was acquired by, Intuit, and eventually it was killed. And so I was looking for personal finance software that was flexible enough to meet the needs of my wife and I wasn't finding anything that was actually truly facilitated what we needed. And so I started out trying to build that. But then as I was building that, I found that it wasn't just about personal finance. There are many other things that go into managing a household that people need. And you can end up in kind of a soup of different tools by trying to combine different things, and paying, $5 to $10 for a personal finance solution, paying another $5 for a to-do list app. And so I wanted to bring all of the things, all of the pillars that go into managing a household together into one roof, but then also see that as an opportunity to understand the household as a platform and build value added products and services on top of that.
Jabari, a lot of listeners are going to hear that backstory and they're going to think, well, you're a software developer. You have these superpowers that you can just build your own solution. And I want to go there with you because I love that idea and that concept that it sounds like you've just put into your life practice, not even business speaking now, is that you've just always felt like, hey, I want to be building things. I want to be pushing the envelope. And I'm in love with Google, for example, how they have embedded into their culture of a certain percentage of employees' time goes towards fun projects, towards side projects. And we all reap the benefits of those. Gmail, I think, was born out of one of those side projects that some employees were working on. And that obviously is one of the most important Google products today. And so, Jabari, along those lines, where along the way did you go from building this for your own use to realizing and deciding this should actually be for consumers? This should be a business. This is something I'm going to launch into the world.
I think the most salient event that made me realize that was the unfortunate passing of my father a couple of months before my wedding. And so when my father passed, my stepmother struggled for years, really, just trying to piece together the disparate parts of their life. She said it took, months to figure out who they paid the mortgage to. It took months to figure out how to get into the home security account just to reset the password. And so if one person is the brains of the house or is the household manager, then it actually is a disservice to the household. It actually puts the other person at risk because anything could happen, and that person may struggle just to come up to speed on the way things are run. And so seeing that pain and feeling that pain that my family had to deal with, and then I went and started traveling that year as well, and I talked about it. I talked about it at several conferences with people, and they really resonated with the idea of household equity, of that a tool or a piece of software isn't just a collection of features, but it can be a vehicle to make sure that people are on the same page, and that the price of not being on the same page can be dire. And so that connection with people, that with sharing my story and then hearing them share their stories and how they connected to what I experienced and what I was building, really made me feel that it was something that needs to exist, not just a project.
What's really fascinating to me, hearing the mind behind this incredible product and really linking your backstory into this and how deeply meaningful it is for you personally, what really strikes me is the fact that this is a rare case where you're building something and you've built and launched something that is not for one user. It is literally for a collaborative team of users, obviously, ideally, people within the family, people within the household. And so how has that changed? Because, Jabari, I'm sure in many use cases in your professional career, you've built things that are used by one person. How different was it designing something that's used by multiple people within a household?
Well, this was actually an important part from the beginning for me, because one of the downsides to Mint, I felt, was that it was really difficult or impossible to share with a partner. You had to basically just have one password and one username and both log in. And I had explored other tools for personal finance tools as well. And some of those were built for multiple users, but those multiple users still had the same shared space. And so there wasn't ability to segment things. But when I got married, my wife and I practiced, accounting methods of just having our own personal accounts, but then also having joint accounts and managing things together while also having, our own concerns on the side. And nothing really supported that. And then also my wife has, her grandmother is 91 years old, and my wife manages her grandmother's household. And so I decided to develop Dena with a household as a core component and a household as a container for all of the concerns or these pillars that are built in. And so you can create many different households. So I might have a personal household with just my personal accounts, my own to-do list, my calendar linked, and then have the joint household that I share with my wife. And then she can have her own house or her own personal household, our joint household, and then also her grandmother's household, where she links her grandmother's financial accounts, has her grandmother's schedule, which she manages. And so what began as an inconvenience of just the way that certain personal finance tools worked, I began to see as a true superpower of Dena that I could build in, where you could build, as many containers as you need to manage the different segments of your life.
Yeah, and it's cool to see how that has manifested. My one complaint about podcasting as a medium is that it's not visual. Most listeners cannot see you and I right now. They're merely listening to us as they drive or when they're at the gym. But Dena is so visual. From the second our team came upon your website and your work, we knew that we had to reach out and invite you onto the show because it's not only so well thought out, but it's beautiful and it makes you want to get rewarded by saving up for your trip to Italy. It makes you want to check things off of your to-do list. There's so many incredible things that go into it, which leads me to Jabari. I don't often ask software developers this question, but I'm so curious your take on it. Is that we've all heard about MVPs from the world of software, minimum viable products, and for a lot of us business owners, it's encouraging to know that we should be shipping a heck of a lot sooner. But oftentimes, when we see businesses such as yours and software such as Dena, we think to ourselves, "That's not an MVP. That's the finished product." What has that evolutionary process looked like for listeners who might come across Dena and think, I'm never going to be at that level? From a business perspective, what has that evolution looked like?
Well, for me, I've never really liked the term MVP. From working at different startups, I've built different MVPs and I'm familiar with the business concepts, but I feel that focusing too much on an MVP makes you often think too small. And as just a personality trait, I love big things. And so I wanted to focus on Dena as a household platform. And so the features weren't personal finance, to-do list, calendar, because if you just build a personal finance app and release it, then you're competing against every other personal finance app. If you just build a to-do list, then you're competing against every to-do list. If you just build a calendar, you're competing against every calendar, and it becomes a race to the bottom because you're not as good as what already exists. And you find yourself adding features to try to bring yourself to parity with those instead of actually executing your true vision. So I knew what my vision was with Dena. I knew what I wanted to accomplish, and it was beyond just those individual pillars. And I felt that if I started with those and released them, then people wouldn't understand or see the true value of what I was building. I needed to build those first so I could build the big things on top of it that actually told the story and solved the problems that I wanted to solve.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I really appreciate and admire that sort of approach to it because as soon as you said it, it makes sense. And when I look at Dena's functionality, you're right. If it was just personal finance at first, that's the box that Dena falls into in my mind. And then the question becomes, do I use Dena for personal finance? Yes or no? And I believe, and obviously you know your industry a heck of a lot better, but I believe that you're in a very specialized market that has enormous needs. But as someone who's within a household, I don't know any other competitors of yours, Jabari. And so with that in mind, I'm super curious what that landscape looks like from your vantage point, because it seems to me like this is not only extremely relevant, but something that is filling a massive gap in the marketplace.
Yeah, I built Dena with the idea that I had no competition, because I, evaluated different tools like other personal finance tools, but I'd never found the exact combination that was powerful. And there are other tools on the market that combine, three of the, say 5 or 6 things that Dena does, but none of them. Many of the existing tools are just wrappers, or they're an umbrella around 5 or 6 different tools. Dena is a platform. And so those 5 to 6 different tools exist within it, but they're the pillars that support other features on top of it. For example, one of the features that I just rolled out recently is a household check-in. And so given that, users have linked their finances, their to-do lists, their calendar, important documents, you can generate an agenda for a weekly check-in that you have with another member of your household. It can analyze the state of your finances, analyze your schedule and where things are kind of off, analyze the to-dos that aren't getting done, create an agenda for you to discuss, and then also capture outcomes from that discussion so that any decisions you made are captured, any action items are captured and to-dos are created from them. Then this serves as a kind of living record of the discussions and decisions that you made that you can go back to. Because, my wife and I have had, discussions in the past where we sat down for an hour or so or more and created a detailed plan for something that we wanted to do. And then a month or two later, we're wondering, oh, wait, what did we decide? And so just having that context already built in provided the ability to just build this on top of it and create this incredibly powerful feature, since we're viewing the household as a platform instead of just looking at I have a bunch of tools that are stitched together in some unnatural way.
Yeah, it sounds like it's also a ton of fun behind the scenes because you are essentially you are your own customer avatar. And so you already deeply understand that marketplace. With that in mind, how much, or I guess the question is, how have you and how much do you solicit feedback from others? Because as a developer, I would imagine that that's something that is a natural part of your workflow, but also thinking about your ability to understand your own needs and then literally just to create it and bake it into that's got to be a fun process to go through. So what does the feedback loop look like?
Well, initially, yes, it was. There's a term in kind of business culture of dog fooding, but I look at which is consuming your own product. But I kind of look at it as human food because this is literally problems that I was facing and building to solve within my own household. But then getting real feedback from people outside of my household. It started with, again, having conversations, traveling and just talking about what I'm doing and talking about the offering and getting feedback from people who have similar problems or, oh, well, I have this problem. Can you do that? And trying to incorporate just the ideas that people had or the pain points that they were experiencing. And then before rolling out to the public, I actually built kind of my own customer advisory board of friends and family and had some regular meetings with them to find where the pain points in the product were. One major discovery was when you have an incredibly big, powerful product, just onboarding is a pain point. And people figuring out, where do I get started? What should I do? And so I built a whole onboarding process to guide people through Dena and the power of it and how to get started. And so outside of my own household, getting real feedback from real people who are using it was critically important. And so I went out and used some of the experience that I had from working at different startups to build a customer advisory board and get feedback from people who are actually trying to work their way through the app itself.
That is so cool. Talk to us more about that onboarding, because obviously I play more inside the world of business tools. I don't have as extensive of a tech stack in my personal life, but with business tools, I love when they're so easily integrated. And so a lot of us business owners, we use similar things such as Slack or maybe Notion, or we use Plaid to hook up a lot of our financial services within tools that we're using. Jabari, what has that onboarding system become for users who sign up to Dena?
Well, the onboarding system starts off with a small questionnaire that tries to understand exactly what the user's needs are, whether they're living solo, or whether they share a household with a partner, whether they have elder care as a concern, or maybe they might be managing a household for an elder like my wife. And so to try to understand their context and where they're starting, and also what their concerns are, whether they're just personal personal finance or, personal finance and schedules, just the different kind of pillars that they are having the most problems with or are most interested in. And then from there, it creates a customized plan of to-dos, of items that they should actually check out. And so if you're interested in personal finance, one of the top items would be go and connect your bank accounts through Plaid. If you're interested in schedules, go connect your Google Calendar or Apple Calendar. And so it creates a tailored path through the app to actually get started and start getting the most out of it.
Very cool. I love that. Especially, I mean, you're speaking music to my ears as soon as you talk about Plaid and Google integrations and all of that, because it's so easy for all of us, and that's where we already live. And it's literally a few clicks away from us integrating our lives, which leads me to a question that I'm sure you're very comfortable answering and you've probably put a lot of thought into, which is, of course, security. A lot of people with a lot of tools today. And Jabari, I'm actually going to call this out because I argue that your skill set has a unique advantage in today's marketplace, because you actually understand development because you are a developer, whereas a lot of vibe coded platforms these days see a lot of security and privacy issues. So what's your response to people who are curious or wondering more about the privacy and security side of things?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, that can be the problem with vibe-coded solutions. But I worked in payments, and I worked in advertising, and I've dealt with customer data, sensitive customer data, and I've worked in environments where SOC 2 compliance was a critical factor. And so Dena is built to be secure from the start. And so not only is everything stored encrypted at rest, which is basically, if anyone was to somehow get a hold of the hard drive that your data is on, it's encrypted. That's kind of by default. But there's another layer above that where all of your data or your sensitive data. So say you connect your, bank accounts through Plaid, and we pull in financial transaction data, the descriptions, the actual names of your bank accounts, things like personal notes, the names of calendar events, all of these things are encrypted in an application layer. So it's not just if someone even got access to the database and just looked at the tables themselves and tried to understand the data, they wouldn't be able to. Add that on top of that, just encryption and fight through the APIs with HTTPS, and there's 3 layers of encryption that Dena uses to protect users' data so that your data is actually completely private.
I love that. Jabari, see that? When people talk about vibe coding replacing software developers and engineers, that answer right there shows, can I create a vibe coded platform? 100%. Do I understand any of the technical aspects that you just said? Absolutely not. And that's why us as consumers, it's so important to continue to have your skill set and your past experiences be part of the solution when you bring technologies to the marketplace. So I'm super grateful for the thought and care that you've put into all of that and how you share that with us today. But because I brought up vibe coding and because we're kind of teetering around AI, let's go there together while we're on the air, because a lot of people are injecting AI into so many different software solutions these days, and it's really cool to see the various ways that plays into it. And I'm sure behind the scenes, I'm sure that even as a software engineer, AI helps you in so many different use cases. So what's your take on where we are at a macro level with regards to AI today as part of our workflows? And then secondly, looking at the present and the future of Dena, how do you see AI playing into all of that?
Well, I actually use AI a lot. The core of Dena was built before a lot of these AI tools existed, but also, I've begun to adopt a lot of them in the development of Dena. But I think that there can be a lot of hype or focus around replacement of people and a replacement of human agency, and I think that Dena itself as a product is the antithesis of that. And what I mean by that is that an agent can't live your life for you. Nothing is going to be able to understand your finances for you or understand your schedule for you. And so trying to offload things onto an AI tool makes sense to a degree, but just like as if you're relying on AI for coding, and then you offload all of the design and implementation, and then something goes wrong. You have to have a mental model as an engineer of exactly how the system works. to be able to understand even if AI is doing the right thing, or if its recommendations are correct. And so my approach to AI is to understand it as a powerful tool and to leverage it as a powerful tool. And so my process is kind of, I sit down and I brainstorm. If I have an idea or a concept that I want to flesh out, I'll go back and forth with a chatbot and brainstorm that idea and flesh it out. I'll also, run it past my wife to actually get real human feedback. Then I'll take that concept and I'll start to have the chatbot build a mock-up so that I can see it and start to move things around and play with it in real time. Once I feel that I have the UI concept or the actual user experience down, then I'll start to break it into or to implement it. And I'll break it into tasks, some of which I'll code myself, some of which I'll have AI code. And so it's involved in every single part of the process, but I leverage it in a way that I believe brings value as opposed to feeling that I need to completely rely on it. And then as far as the product itself, I've tried to use AI intelligently where I have a feature where you can ask a chatbot or a question answering interface things about the household. So I mentioned that when my father died, one of the difficulties was for my stepmother to figure out who they paid the mortgage to. You can just go into Dena and ask, who do we pay the mortgage to? And the answer comes up. And so that was an incredibly powerful way to leverage AI without feeling that, it with it being natural and an actual, addition to the app instead of just saying that we're using it in order to capitalize on a buzzword.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way that you've thought about that and obviously the way that you navigate that. And Jabari, I feel like that's just a tiny preview into the many thoughts and considerations and how intentional and strategic you are in the way that you think about not only Dena the product, but of course Dena the business and Dena the solution that impacts so many lives and households positively in so many different ways. So I've got to ask you, time is running quickly with you today, Jabari, because I so appreciate and admire so many of the things that you do and the way that you operate. But I'd love for us to zoom out. And I want to hear about Jabari, the founder, not just the software developer. What does your executive time look like? Because obviously Dena is more than just a tech solution. It is also a fully fledged business at this point. And so when you sit down to carve out that executive time, what are the questions you're asking yourself from a business perspective? What are the things on your mind? What's that roadmap look like?
It depends on the phase. And so when I was initially developing Dena and fleshing out the concept, it was a lot of brainstorming. Okay, again, playing with concepts, building prototypes, implementing the prototypes that I decided to turn into real features. At this stage, it's coming up to speed on marketing. It's developing marketing strategies, trying to get traction, working on traction channels. So whether it be social media marketing, blogging, it's coming up to speed and to try to develop mastery of the pieces that I didn't touch as a software engineer. And I feel that that's one of the challenges as a solopreneur is that you're not going to be good at everything starting out. Like I spent 20 years as a software engineer. I know how to build products, but selling them is something completely different. But that's what excites me at this point is that, okay, I'm not just going 0 to 1 on building a product and giving it to the world. I'm figuring out how to tell its story and to connect it to the struggles that people have in a scalable way. And so that's what my executive time right now is focused on. It's again, dogfooding the product, making sure that it's continuing to serve the problems that the existing users have, but then also figuring out and dedicating time every day to figuring out how to continue to tell the story and how to continue to scale my outreach.
Yes, I love hearing fellow entrepreneurs when we dig in to those many things that we don't know about, and it's our first time. How the heck could we know all of these things when it's our first time doing it? So Jabari, huge kudos to you in all of the things that you're pushing forward. It makes me super excited to hear the way that you answer this final question, because it's super broad. You can take it in any direction you want. I always ask it at the end of every episode, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
I think the most important thing from my perspective is to understand yourself and to understand the value that you want to add to the world. To me, entrepreneurship is not about, just trying to build a company for the sake of having a company. I started off building something that I think the world needs. And I think that when you have that at the core of what you do and what you build, then the rest doesn't matter. Again, you don't have any competition because you are implementing your path and the value that you can provide to the world. And so I'd say, if you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, continue to understand what your value proposition is and focus solely on that. And I think the rest becomes easier.
Yes. Oh, I love that advice. I'm super grateful, Jabari, for all the insights that you shared with us, not only in that advice, but really in so generously and transparently sharing the way that you think about these things as well. It really shines through in both your product, your story, the way you talk about these things. It shines through how deeply meaningful this is for you and how much you believe in this being a solution. And again, I just want to toot your horn a little bit, because as an end consumer, I firmly believe that you are filling such an incredibly important gap in the marketplace that is only going to become even more important in this AI era. I think that it's funny how many people are worried about AI taking things away, but also it allows us to start paying more attention and being more intentional about the things that do matter in our real personal human lives. And this is such a great example of that. So Jabari, I already complained about the fact that podcasting is not a visual platform, so I want listeners to go check out Dena. So for listeners who are already hearing you and I talk about it and saying, all right, I want to see it, I want to sign up for it, you have a free trial, you've got so many cool things even before people sign up so they can see how it works. So Jabari, for listeners who want to find Dena, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
All right, check out Dena at Dena.one. That is the website. It is also available right now on the Play Store, and it is pending in the App Store, so that'll be available soon. You can also check out our social media, Dena.one, on Threads and on Instagram.
Yes, and listeners, you already know we're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Dena is spelled D-E-E-N-A. That's D-E-E-N-A.one. Spell that number one out, so O-N-E. So Dena.one. You can click right on through. Don't worry about remembering it. Don't worry about spelling. You can click right on through from the show notes. Otherwise, Jabari, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Thanks for having me.